be it a trying situation or be it the everyday mundane activities of a mom. God has a purpose and a plan for it. He can use it not only to grow you and to bless you, but for you to be able to bless and encourage another mom in the future. So know that it is with purpose that God is taking you through, and He will be with you every step of the journey.
Welcome to the All Things Beloved podcast with me, Christina Patterson, where we speak with real women about real faith in a real God. This is a safe place to have honest conversations about faith, life, relationships, purpose, and well, all things beloved. Thank you so much for joining today's conversation. Be sure to share with a friend and enjoy the show. Hello, beloved, and welcome to another episode of All Things Beloved, where we chatted up about motherhood, life, ministry, family, relationships, and well, all things beloved. I am so excited to introduce today's guest today because she's a friend of mine and she has some encouraging words for us, especially for us mothers. I want to introduce you to Nicole Barnett, and she is a woman who fully embraces her calling to encourage moms of young children. She is a wife and mom of 3, and she enjoys affirming the value of motherhood and family. Nicole is a new author of a 31-day devotional called Out of the Mouths of Babes, where readers can enjoy lighthearted stories of motherhood while connecting daily with God. As a postpartum depression survivor and clinical social worker by training, Nicole engages in maternal mental health advocacy, education, and support. Welcome to All Things Beloved, Nicole.
Thank you, Christina. It's a blessing to be here. Thank you for having me.
Now, that was your official bio, but I always like to give our guests an opportunity to share in your own words who you are and what you do.
Well, I'll tell you, I love the name of your ministry, Beloved Women, because it helps us stay straight with our identity. And I always say that first and foremost, I'm a daughter of the King. That's really who I am. But through that, He gives me the privilege and the blessing of playing different roles. I love being married to my husband, Jeff. We've been married for 24 years. And together we have been raising those 3 children that you referenced. They are now ages 16, 18, and 21. But I clearly remember them being a newborn in ages 3 and 5. And I really have enjoyed being their mother and watching them grow. I think you also mentioned that my background is in clinical social work, and I am proud to say I studied at Howard University. That's very near and dear to my heart as well. And I just enjoy encouraging moms. My husband and I also teach in marriage ministry together. And so we've had the blessing to also share a lot with newlyweds as well as other married couples. And I have just found it a joy to mentor young wives, young mothers, and just encourage people along their family life and family journey. And then one sort of secret thing I can say about myself is that I think I love carnival eats, carnival foods. And the reason I say that I think that I do, I don't watch a lot of television, but my husband found this show called Carnival Eats. And whenever I'm watching it, I just enjoy seeing all of the food. And I told him one day we're just going to have to take a road trip and go around to all these carnivals so I can get some of the carnival eats.
Yeah, you're going to have to come down to North Carolina. We have a big state fair in the fall, and there's all kind of carnival foods and candies and just the most unhealthy food you could probably find.
I know, that's the bad thing about it. I think I would just take a couple of bites of each carnival eat that I find. But yes, I'm there. There.
We'll have to keep you posted on that. Today, in my hands, I have your newest book, Out of the Mouths of Babes. And it's a 31-day devotional for moms. What I love about it is that each devotional, you actually use real life examples from your own experiences with your kids and how those experiences drew you closer to God. And I thought this was a really interesting take on a book, because a lot of moms' devotionals are really just more so only about, your relationship with God. But I love how you incorporate your relationship with your children and how that relationship has pushed you closer to your relationship with God. Can you share with us what inspired you to write this book and write it in this particular format?
Well, I will tell you what inspired me to write it in this particular format actually is my mother, and being obedient to her. When I would tell her stories about her grandbabies, and you know how grandmothers are, they love their grandbabies, they love hearing about them. And when I would tell her things, she would say, "Oh, you need to write that down. You ought to write that down. That's so funny." And I would say, "Well, Mom, you think it's funny because, you're their grandmother." But she encouraged me just to write down just the various experiences and stories that I was having with my young girls. And she said one day, even just for them, even if they just want to read it one day, they'll be blessed and they'll think it's funny to see. And so out of obedience to her, I just started jotting down stories here and there of different experiences that happened. Some of them funny, some of them really poignant, some of them embarrassing, just writing them down. And at some point in the process, the Lord just started revealing to me sort of spiritual lessons that matched that story. And that's when I really realized that he was teaching me through them, that I was being drawn closer to him and able to learn more about him and his character and his relationship with me, just in the very everyday interactions, with my children. And that just made me want to embrace those interactions all the more. So I definitely started just truly writing down the stories. And then later, God would give me the spiritual application. And I thought that it would bless other mothers at some point.
Yeah. Can you share with us just maybe one of your most favorite experiences that God used to speak to you through your children?
One of my favorite ones, I would have to say, it revolves around a time that my husband was having a little short Bible lesson with our girls when he started, and when they were young, and he would make it short and fun and sweet. And I would say around this time, I think our girls were maybe ages 8, 6, and 4. So, it had to be short. And he decided to talk about spiritual adoption, just the concept of being adopted into the family of God and God just loving us enough to bring us into his family. So he does this quick little devotion. And at the end, he says, "Everybody say it together, spiritual adoption." And all the girls say, "Spiritual adoption." They were all into it. And so a few minutes later, I'm talking to them and I'm like, "Hey, so what was the Bible lesson about today?" And my 6 and 4-year-old, they just look at me like dumbfounded, as if they had no idea what I was talking about. Like they weren't just there when we were just having the family devotion time. And I said, "Come on, Dad." He had us say it at the end. God invited us to his family through spiritual. And I'm trying to get them to say the word adoption, and they are just clueless. And so finally I get a little, exasperated, and I say, "Come on, think. What do you call it when a husband and a wife take in a child who wasn't born to them, but they raised the child like it was theirs all along?" And my 6-year-old pauses and she says, "Kidnapping." And I was like, that's not the word I was going for. I was going for adoption. But that made me think. Later, God convicted me that even though we are lovingly adopted into his family as his children, that sometimes we behave more like we've been kidnapped. We kick against God, we fight, we try to run away from home, run away from him as if he's holding us, against our wills. And instead of just being grateful for just that honor and the blessing of being lovingly adopted by the King of the universe, that sometimes our attitude doesn't reflect that. And so that story always reminds me just to be grateful just to be beloved, just to be a daughter of the King.
Yes, I love that. And I just love how you just masterfully took those moments with your children and used them as powerful illustrations to show moms God's love and desire for them.
Yes. And that he can speak really in those everyday moments. I think sometimes
Yes.
as moms, we want to rush past those things. We want to rush past
Mm-hmm.
those times because the day to day of motherhood can be mundane. It can be
Yes.
tough, just being in the trenches day in and day out. And sometimes we find ourselves wishing away those moments and wishing
Yes.
away that time instead of just taking the time to embrace it and to realize God may be trying to give me a message
Mm-hmm.
through what just seemed like a mess, or through what might have seemed like a failure, or through what might have seemed embarrassing. Maybe God is talking to me, because I'm sure many moms have figured out by now that our children teach us way more than we teach them. Like
Right.
that is really how it goes, that God is teaching us in the process. So I just want to encourage moms to live in those moments and
Yeah.
embrace them and don't rush them away.
You know, when my daughter was she was about 5 or 6. She was almost 6 at the time. And every night I would read her a bedtime story and tuck her in, you know. And it was always for me one of the hardest parts of the day because I was so tired by the end of the day. And I would just try to find the shortest story possible so we can just kind of get through this whole routine, get you. Because if I didn't do it, she's like, "You're not going to read me a story." Like, you know, we had made a whole thing about it. And I remember just feeling really tired one night and just kind of wanting to like just rush through. There was this little devotional book that we were going through, and it was this one page at night. So we would read one little page and just feeling like, the finish line was getting in my bed and just having some time to myself. So I'm rushing through this particular lap of my day. And we were reading the devotional that day on the Lamb's Book of Life in the Bible. And my daughter was like, "Well, what is that? And you know, how can I get my name in the book? I want my name to be in the book." And so I realized, I was like, "Oh, this is an opportunity for me to really present the gospel to her." You
Yes.
know? And so I did, and she was like, "Okay." And I said, and eventually I asked her, you know, if she wanted to be in the Lamb's Book of Life, did she want to pray the prayer of salvation? And she said yes. And we prayed, and I was so convicted because I wanted to rush that moment. And God was like, "You need to be right here in this moment," because the work that seems like, oh, you're just reading them a story, oh, you're just changing another diaper, oh, you're just washing the dishes again and folding the clothes again, you get lost in it, and you forget the eternal impact that it has. Yes. Because it seems so small, and it seems like it doesn't matter because you're just gonna have to do it over again tomorrow anyways. But that moment really reminded me, Christina, don't rush this. Yes. You know, every little moment God is using to have an eternal impact on your children.
Yes.
You know?
And aren't you glad you did not miss it? You know, aren't you glad?
My heart won't right. My heart won't right, but I was ready.
After it was over.
Anyways.
Yes, after it was over, you know, you were glad that you didn't miss it, because that's a moment, you know, as a mother that you will have always to be, yes, you know, to share with your daughter, with her making the most important decision, yes, that she will ever make in her life. And if you had been too tired, and if you had said, "Oh, we're skipping the story tonight, you're just not getting the story tonight," you would have missed that. And I call those mommy moments. I feel like those are precious mommy moments from God. And I encourage readers in my devotional to come. You know, I love to hear about mommy moments. And so I encourage them to come to my website and share your mommy moments, because they're precious. They're worth writing down, and they're worth remembering for yourself and for your child. So that's a perfect example of a mommy moment that instead of you just glancing by it and missing it, you were able to experience it, and it drew not only you closer to the heart of God, but also your daughter to making the most important decision she could ever make in her life. You have made my day just by sharing that story.
I love it. I love it. And listen, y'all, and I just want to encourage people, like, that's what this book is. It's all these mommy moments to inspire you in your mommy moments. Yes. Now, I will say, I think you said this book, though, did take you almost 10 years just about to finish, to create and finish. And I'm sure because you had to actually live out those mommy moments before you could write them down. But what did God teach you in that season of compiling this book together and looking back and being like, wow, it took 10 years, because we do kind of want to rush things sometimes.
Yes. If you had told me that this book process would have been 10 years, I would have said, nah, you're absolutely kidding me. I'm the type of person, I'm pretty much kind of type A. I like to get things done. If you give me something to do, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it well. I'm going to get it done, get it finished. And God just made it so clear to me that this book was not going to be that process. Because first of all, it was gathering the stories. I initially was just writing and recording stories as they came along. But once the idea of the book came in my spirit, I did feel like it was going to be a quicker process and that I would be able to get it done quickly and finish. And I had to trust God with the timing of everything being pulled together and the timing of him giving me sort of the spiritual applications. And then even after I had that, I realized that I wanted to give readers an opportunity to think a little bit more. And so I added a think it through reflection question so that could maybe draw moms in a little bit, closer to their heart. And then I thought I wanted to give moms a chance to really make it personal, each devotion, and maybe giving them a chance to express their heart to God, either in a brief prayer or even just journaling. And so there's a little spot and space for moms to I give a sort of a prompt to start you, and then you finish either with a prayer. Because I know if you're a mama of little people, you might not have time. You might can't even find a pencil with a point on it or a pen with ink in it. But you may not be able to write out. But for those who like to journal, there's a space to write. And those who like to pray, is just a spot just to express your heart on that particular devotion, to where it is with God. So as God kept giving me different pieces to add to it, I realized that this was going to be in his timing, on his timetable, that he was finishing this through me. And for me, it was a lesson of a constant lesson that I'm continuing to learn, of not doing things in my own effort. Of yes, doing my part. Faith without works is dead. I have to do my part. I do all things unto the Lord, but to really trust him with the fruit of it, to trust him with the timing. And right now I can just see the perfect timing of it. So it definitely encouraged me to trust God. And I would say another way that the timing of God has shown itself with this book is that it has allowed me to not only write this book, but to then be able to reflect back, now that my daughters are older. And because most of the stories are, I would say, of when they were 12 and younger. Around in that time frame. And so just the perspective that I've gained in being even a few years out from that has also been a joy. And it gives me a better space to be in, just to encourage other moms. That is just my heart now, to encourage moms, especially of young children, but moms in any point of life, and just letting them know what you're doing is important. There is a purpose. There is a goal. And though you may not get applauded for it, it really is something that's worthwhile.
Yeah. I want to know, what encouragement would you give to the mom that's like, I hear you, Nicole, but I'm not feeling it right now. I'm not really feeling it. I'm feeling invisible. I would say that was one of the challenging feelings of being a young mom, because everything you're doing is for everybody else. The mundane things that you're doing feel like they don't really amount to not anything, or they're not significant. When you encounter moms that are kind of in those trenches of motherhood, and they feel invisible, and they feel like their work isn't amounting to anything, what encouragement do you give them when they're at that place?
Yes. The first thing that I try to remind moms is your role as a mother is a high calling. I know on earth and sort of in our society value, that may not seem like much, but it really is valuable to God. And we can look at that. One of my favorite scriptures, I sign my books with this scripture, is Psalms 127:3, which tells us that children are a reward from the Lord.
Yeah.
And if we go on to read, it points out that they're arrows that we are to be aiming, for his kingdom and in his kingdom. So he has entrusted us with just such a powerful role that it may seem mundane from day to day to day. But if you step back and look at the big picture of it, that in our role as mothers, we are forming and shaping the human heart of a child. Yeah. Think about that God has entrusted you with that. And so the care that you give from day to day, the love that you give, the discipline that you give, that you pour into, the training that you give, showing them how to do something for the 57th time over and over and over again, that is forming a human heart and a human soul that you are then going to launch out just like an arrow into the kingdom, into this world. And as moms of faith, we are believing in raising a godly seed so that they will be representatives for the kingdom. That's the most important work in the world. Yeah. And it's easy to lose sight of that because the world doesn't really applaud us or give us kudos for that. But that is really the heart of God. And if we even think about it, before even the law was given to Moses, before Jesus even came along, God created family with children. And the first family was a hot mess. So, if your family is a hot mess, you welcome, you just in with the original family.
Right.
But God still had a purpose and a plan through all of that. And mothers are right there in the trenches of that beginning role of shaping and forming each and every life. So I just try to encourage moms. It's a powerful place for you to be. I know you may not feel like it. I know you may not get applauded for it. You certainly don't get paid for it. No. So you don't get that sort of applause and that type, but that God sees you and God sees every toy that you pick up, every piece of clothing that you wash, every lunch that you pack, as you do it unto him and as you do it to nurture your family and your children. It's important. And that actually reminds me of one of the devotions in the book. And this one actually is about my niece, because I do include other stories in the book. But this story, my sister, Lisa, told me about her daughter when she was 4. And she wanted to be in the church talent show at her church. And so she went to her mom and said, "Mom, I want to be in the church, talent show." And my sister was like, "Well, what are you going to do?" And she said, "I'm going to count to 100. And my sister kind of was like, "Oh, counting to 100, I'm not so sure if that's a talent." She's thinking this in her head, trying to figure out how she could tell her daughter, "I think they want people like who can sing or play the piano or dance." And her daughter was like, "No," my niece said, "No, I'm going to count to 100. And so my sister was like, "Okay." And the talent show day came, and my niece was a little nervous. So she went out on stage with my sister and was holding on to her pant leg. And, she nervously announced, "I'm going to count to 100. And she starts to count 1, 2, very slowly, according to my sister. And my sister is like, "I can't believe it." Like she's first of all, she's counting to 100 for a talent. And now she's doing it slowly.
Right.
And she keeps going, and 56, 57. And she finally gets to the end with what seems like an eternity to my sister. And my sister says the congregation just burst out in applause and cheering as if my niece had just earned a gold medal, in the Olympics. And she said someone even shouted out, "Go for 1,000, And that story made me think, my sister maybe initially didn't think that counting to 100 was that big of a deal, was that much of a talent. And I think we can feel that some ways about what we do as moms. It may not seem like a big deal. It's helping with homework for the 50 millionth time. It's all of those things that we do. But I like to remind moms that God is clapping like crazy. He's cheering and applauding like crazy for those little things that you do day after day after day. So they are important to the heart of God. And I remind moms just to remember that.
Oh, I love that. I love that illustration and that example, and specifically what you said about remembering that our work is unto God. because I totally agree that within our society, we don't value motherhood, mothering as much as we should. And then when you internalize that as a woman, as opposed to really reading the Word of God and placing God's value on you and the work that you do and working to Him and not man, it can cause a lot of discouragement. A
It
lot
certainly
of
can.
discouragement.
It can.
And so I appreciate you saying that.
I
Um,
also look
yeah,
at the examples of mothers in God's word, that's
yeah,
another place that we can look to in God's word, where we can see the value that God places on motherhood. And it would
right.
just so be this week in my personal devotions that I was reading about Moses and Moses' parents and how much faith that they had to have,
Mhm,
and especially his mother, Jochebed, that she think about it. She had a baby in the midst of an edict where male children were going to be killed, right?
mm,
And that was what went forth. So think about the pressure that she was under in terms of deciding, I am going to hide my baby. I'm going
mhm,
to hide baby Moses because God is just telling me to hide this baby. She hid the baby for 3 months, she and the family. Think about all that she had to do to keep that
mhm.
baby quiet,
Oh, the
to
anxiety.
make sure that that baby stayed protected, to make sure everybody in the family, knew. I'm sure they had code words. I'm sure they had everything that they had to do to keep this baby protected. And God guided her every step of the way in the trenches of motherhood from day to day to day for those 3 months until he gave her the idea to make that little boat for him and
Mm,
to put reeds in it. And as I was studying, I even saw where the reeds were formed in a way that would have tried to help stay off the alligators or crocodiles that would have been in the river that they
oh,
placed him in.
wow.
So just thinking of all that God gave to her as a mother to protect her child and to save her child. And when she did it, in the end, not only did Pharaoh's daughter, have a heart to want to take in her baby, but Miriam, the daughter,
Mhm.
was able to be there and say, hey, do you need a mama to nurse this baby? And Jochebed got paid to nurse her own baby.
Oh,
She got paid to be a
she
mama. Look
needed
at there. Look at there. We got a
it.
biblical example of a mama getting paid, right? And if you think about that, God's heart is with mothers, and there's
Yeah.
example after example, just her, Hannah, Sarah, Mary, in and of herself. We can
Mm,
go to God's word and see how God has a heart for mothers. And even Jesus, when he was on the cross, even in his dying words, one of his last words was making sure that his mother was taken care of.
mm.
So God has a heart for mommies. He has a heart for us, and he values the role that we do. And we as women need to just keep reminding. It's great when others do it, but if nobody else reminds us of it, we as mothers need to remind each other and give us each other our kudos and our applause for what we're doing from day to day.
Yes, yes, that's an excellent example of all the moms in the Bible and God's heart for moms. And it's just that's a special reminder that we all need, because sometimes motherhood can present a lot of challenges that you might not even expect. And I know one that you share is your experience with postpartum depression. Can you tell us what that is and your experience with postpartum depression?
Sure. Postpartum depression is one of several maternal mental health conditions that can come about, in this case for postpartum depression, that can come about after the birth of a
Mhm.
child. And what we know it to be sort of related to sort of a combination of factors. There's a physiological basis of it that relates to hormones and the various hormonal changes that can take place after giving birth and even in nursing, but also the stressors that can come from being a new mom,
Mhm.
being sleep deprived, maybe not eating and being able to take care of yourself the best in the best way that you possibly could. And then other factors can be moms not having support there to really help them during that season. And so it can look different for every woman, but it's sort of like the perfect storm, sort of it can come
Yeah.
together for different reasons and cause sort of mom to plummet into a state where she's just not quite herself. And it can show itself with symptoms of anxiety and depression. There are other maternal mental health conditions. And I think you mentioned my background was in clinical social work, and I do a lot of advocacy around this. It can show itself in other ways, but depression and anxiety is one of the classic ways. Statistics are looking now that pretty much 1 in 7 new moms will experience postpartum depression. And so it's something that we really want to be on the lookout for, that moms really do need assistance with and treatment and support with as they go through this season. For myself, I experienced it significantly after the birth of my third child, my third daughter. So it can happen, doesn't have to be just necessarily after the first birth. It can be later with subsequent children. Sometimes having a history of depression and anxiety in and of itself could also be a risk factor for moms. But for me, it really did manifest itself in classic signs of depression and anxiety. For me, it came in the form of just severe fatigue and tiredness, to the point that was well beyond what I would have expected, as a new mom. In my case, because I'd had 2 children previously, I sort of knew what the bounce back should look like after having a child. And for me, for this time, I just wasn't bouncing back. I felt like I had just been run over by a truck, and my mind was moving so slowly. It would take me twice as long, if not longer, to finish any type of task, any type of chore. At its worst, the most I could do would just be to hold my infant, and I took a little safety gate, and I would gate myself and my 3-year-old and my 5-year-old in together, and I would just hold on to them and just wait for my husband to get home, because I really couldn't accomplish much of anything else, not any housework tasks. It was just all I could do was just to take care of them and to make sure that they were okay. But it was becoming clear over a period of time. I spiraled down for about 3 months that something was severely wrong, and I started becoming afraid that they were going to end up becoming hurt by negligence from me, that I was going to go to sleep on them when I was supposed to be monitoring them, that they would get out the front door, that they would turn on the stove. That started becoming my fear, that they were going to be hurt in that way. And I really knew that I needed to get some help at that point. So it was a very scary time for me. And I really felt that it was a waste of time at the time that I was, going through it, and even a little bit after I got over it. But I later learned to embrace that, even though that was just such a tough time for me. I embraced it because after the fact, the Lord allowed me to share my story and to share it with other moms, and to be able to be in a place to help moms who maybe were even on the brink of suicide. And so God took probably the worst situation that's ever happened to me in my life, but allowed me to be able to use it for good and to be able to bless others. But that was a tough season that many women go through. And it can be a challenge because everyone thinks motherhood is supposed to be so nice and fun and cheery, and everything is just supposed to be great. But if you are not yourself, I have one of a colleague in the field sort of says, if your basic personality is still not intact, trust that instinct that something's not right and something's not there, and you want to call your healthcare provider to see if you need some assistance and support for help.
Yeah. When I had my daughter, I remember she was around 1 year old, and we had moved from Maryland back to North Carolina. And my husband was working nights, and I just remember that being like a really hard season for me, and being in what very similar situation with you said about. You said you put the gate up and you would just be in the little, like I would just like be in the living room, make sure, she was safe. And I would just lay on the couch. And I just remember having such a hard time to get up. And I remember everything felt so heavy. Like just to sweep the floor felt like I was sweeping the floor, but like with like a boulder on my back. Like, I don't know, everything and so I didn't want to get up. And I didn't know about postpartum depression. This was my first child, so I didn't know what signs to look for, And so I remember thinking, why am I so lazy? Why can I not just get up and clean the house? Like, it's not that complicated, But it didn't click to me like, Christina, you're normally a hard worker. Like, you normally get stuff done. So like, this is out of character for you. Maybe you need, like that thought just didn't even come in my mind. And I mean, it was for a few months that I kind of was going through that, and just all those warning signs that you just listed, I can see. And I was talking to someone, and they were like, you might have had some delayed postpartum, because my daughter was 1, so that's another reason why I wouldn't have necessarily been looking for it. And I was like, I didn't even know that was like a thing,
Yes.
So I think
even being the year, even with you saying it being a year, we define it now. The sort of total spectrum is called perinatal mood and anxiety disorders, which covers all of pregnancy up to a year out. So many moms, you can be several months out from having your child and still experience hormonal changes or any of the other set of changes that could bring on postpartum depression. And so that is a common mistake. Most people think, oh, it happens right after you have the baby and right after. And most moms, we would say 80% of moms go through sort of what we call a classic baby blues, which is not postpartum depression, but a baby blues is sort of, for the first couple of weeks, 2 or 3 weeks, you're just sort of getting back to yourself. You're very sleep deprived. That's sort of more of a normal thing that most moms go through that you should start popping out of. When you don't pop out of it, that's when it's time to be concerned. Or if it's later on, as then you were experiencing, then that's when you sort of want to say, hey, maybe there's an issue going on here. But I know, especially as sometimes as women of color, we do that strong Black woman thing, we don't want to admit to having any struggles and challenges. And really our rates for postpartum depression, as well as a plethora of conditions that are related to pregnancy and childbirth, we fare worse in. We have some of the highest incidents. And so it's really important for us, again, to educate our sisters, to be spaces to make it okay to say, hey, I'm struggling. I am having a hard time. I'm not feeling like I really think that I should be feeling, and to really be able to comfort moms who come to us in that way and to let them know that it is okay to seek help and to seek treatment and support. And that looks different for different women. For some people, it's just having physical support in the house. For others, it might be more treatment and therapy, and it might include medication. It could be a number of things that could help you get back to the state that you need to be. But we want to open that door and have that door open for moms to receive support. And I feel like whether you even experience postpartum depression or not, all new moms need help. Motherhood is tough.
Yes.
It's just tough. And it's a tough adjustment and transition. And so that's another part of my heart is just to make it be okay for moms to say, I'm struggling, I'm having a hard time, I need some help.
Yeah. And I think, like you said, I think that's in many times the first step that needs to be taken, but sometimes the hardest, because I know when I had my daughter, I felt this immense responsibility and weight of taking care of her and being the strong mom and being everything that she needed me to be. And so when you want to be that strong mom, then it makes it harder to admit when you're like, I'm struggling right now, because your focus is, I got to be strong for my baby. I got to get this done. I got to do this. And like you said, you pushing through,
Yes.
But looking back, I can be like, oh no, I needed some help. Like,
help.
I remember we ended up moving and my husband switched jobs, and things just kind of got a little bit easier. And I just remember it kind of lifting and just kind of coming out of that season, but and kind of be looking back like, what was that?
What was that? Right. What was that?
What was that? I wanted to ask if there's a woman that might be watching and she's listening and thinking, oh man, maybe I am struggling a little bit more than I thought I should be, or maybe this might be more problematic than I expected, or maybe I'm exhibiting some signs of postpartum depression or even delayed postpartum depression, or I know someone who might be, what resources and help do you guide women like that to?
Yes, first I would encourage, first thing I would say to sort of help counter that, I have to be strong and I have to push through. What I say to women is, good moms, strong moms get support and help when they need it. It's not, the strong mom isn't strong because she just pushes her way through and keeps trekking on through everything. That it takes a good mom and a strong mom to admit that she needs help and that she needs support. And that's a wonderful thing. That's showing that you are a good mother by wanting to get the help that you need to be the best mom that you can be. So I always start there just to sort of get through some of that. It's okay to ask for help. I definitely encourage moms to start with their OBGYN or their healthcare provider, sometimes even a healthcare provider that you may feel closest to. Because one of the problems is, especially after delivery, you might see your OB 6 weeks after the birth of the baby, and then you don't see them anymore after that. So it may be your child's pediatrician. It may be just any healthcare provider that you maybe could reach out to. Personally, I always say start there. But a great resource is Postpartum Support International. Their website is postpartum.net. And they have a plethora of resources, support groups, information or resources that you can find locally that are specific to helping women who are struggling with perinatal mood and anxiety disorders. They have branches all over. You go in, you click in, you put in your state, your zip code, and everything will come up to what's available for you. To me, that is one of the quickest ways to get in touch with providers in your particular area that can help you. And they have all been trained. I've received training from Postpartum Support International. And so these are folks that know exactly what you're dealing with. And it may not even be just symptoms of depression and anxiety. It could be just symptoms of obsessive compulsive disorder, where you're sort of doing compulsions, washing your hands often. If you have a fear of something playing over and over in your mind, of something harmful happening to your baby, that's another type of symptom that can be there. Some women, it may just come out even just in bursts of anxiety that more so look like anger. You're just feeling more angry than you normally feel. I know women are often hesitant to even admit to having any problems because most people think of postpartum psychosis when they think of postpartum depression. And psychosis is on the very far end. It's very, very rare. And that is when moms are in a psychotic state and they may end up harming themselves and their children. That is not the majority of cases that are in that whole maternal mental health spectrum. Most moms are going to be in that space of dealing with depression symptoms, not eating the same way, eating or sleeping too much, sleeping too much or not enough, one of those ends, not being able to sleep, not finding pleasure in doing the things that normally brought you pleasure. For me, I used to love to go get my hair done. Like that was one of the things I loved to do, even, post. And I would go and I would feel just as sad and depressed, before going to the hair salon as I did after the hair salon.
Gotcha.
As you can see, I'm a talker. I stopped not talking to people, not taking calls. Like there were parts of my personality that were just changing and going down. And so those are going to be more classic symptoms that you can look for. But if something is not right, trust that mommy instinct that you have inside of you. If something's not right, reach out to your health professional or go to postpartum.net and you will find all the information that you need.
That is so helpful. Thank you so much for guiding us in the right direction. I could talk to you all day, Nicole. I really could. You are such an encouragement and a blessing to moms. But before we go, I wanted to know, is there any final encouragement that you would like to give to all the moms, all of our beloved moms watching today?
Wow. The final encouragement I say that I would give relates something to earlier I said in terms of really embracing your mommy moments. Just embrace those everyday experiences and some of the larger experiences that God may take you through. For me, I just shared a little bit about my postpartum depression experience. Finishing this book was part of just sort of my final knockout punch to the enemy. And that I felt that experience that the enemy meant it to discourage me and to try to take away my joy of being a mother. But instead of allowing postpartum depression to do that, I decided to embrace that experience, use it to try to help and bless other women. And from that, even this book, was born as sort of the final punch that I could give to the enemy.
Right.
So just realize that everything that you're going through, Mom, be it a trying situation or be it the everyday mundane activities of a mom, God has a purpose and a plan for it. He can use it not only to grow you and to bless you, but for you to be able to bless and encourage another mom in the future. So know that it is with purpose that God is taking you through, and He will be with you every step of the journey.
I love that. Thank you so much for your encouragement. I want to encourage all of our moms to get Nicole's book, Out of the Mouths of Babes. It's a 31-day devotional just for you moms. So I want you to get a copy and then get a copy for another mom for Mother's Day to bless her as well. Now, Nicole, can you tell us where we can connect with you and get your book, and how can we connect with you after this interview?
Sure. You can connect with me on Instagram at Your Mommy Moments. That's MOMMY for mommy. But the book can be purchased through Amazon, but also on my website. And you can connect with me there. Feel free to contact me there. My website is www.yourmommymoments.com. And I would love to hear from you, love to hear you share some of your mommy moments with me. I always enjoy reading those.
Nicole, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Beloved, thank you so much for watching. I am sure that today's video was an encouragement to you. If it is, will you please be sure to share it with another mom, because you just never know who might need some beloved encouragement today. As always, thank you so much for watching. And until next time, be beautiful, be blessed, and be loved.